Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel once again, where we talk all things health and healing from a holistic perspective. And today will be no different. Today, we're going to talk about a different type of toxicity. I'm always telling you guys about different toxicities that we're getting virtually from everywhere. We're getting toxins from the air. We're getting toxins from our water at home. We're getting toxins from our foods. We're getting heavy metal toxins. But the one toxin that is quite often not talked about enough is mold toxicity. And this is the one that quite often people never consider when they go in for a doctor's visit, okay? And so I'm gonna break down to you some of the signs and symptoms of mold toxicity, but before I do that, let me explain how much of an issue this is. And before I even do that, let me explain what mold toxicity is. So mold toxicity is essentially the toxins that we get from what are called mycotoxins, the spores that come from mold. So what happens when you're growing mold, either in the home or in your car or wherever it may be, that mold will create spores. Those spores can produce its own toxins that we know as mycotoxins. And these mycotoxins can have a detrimental effect, not only on our neurological system, which is our brain and spinal cord, but it also can even cause death. Okay, so it's a really important conversation we need to have. And the reason why, again, is because of what I just mentioned. And also, this is something that quite often isn't looked for when you go into your doctor. Your doctor isn't gonna think to look and or ask you questions around, do you have mold in the home? Have you been exposed to mold? Do you know what the mold looked like? How long were you exposed to it? And one of the reasons they're not going to ask you is because this isn't a conversation that we have as healthcare professionals when we're in school. And so because we're not having those conversations, maybe we have a little bit of it in toxicology, if you even have to take toxicology. But if you don't have to take that course, you most likely aren't going to have a lot of conversation around mold toxicity. You're going to hear about fungus and things of that nature, but it's really important to understand that mold toxicity is a huge issue, and I'll explain why in just a second. One of the things that I think is really important, and I mentioned this before as well too, 25% of the population don't have the proper genes or biochemistry to be able to detoxify certain things out of the body. As a result, when people come into contact with certain toxicities, again, whether it be a heavy metals toxicity or mold toxicity like we're talking about today, 25% of the population is going to have an issue with it because they don't have the things that are naturally in place for the vast majority of the population. So that's one thing. The other thing that's really important is that mold and fungus grow in warm, damp, moist, humid conditions. Okay. And the unfortunate thing is that isn't just geographic, based on geographics. That's also based on the conditions of your home and the conditions of your work environment and even schools for children as well, too. Because it's not just what happens at home. A lot of us are spending the vast majority of our day outside of the home. So if it's you as a parent, then it's out at work and there could be a mold issue there. If it's the kids and they're going to school, there could be a mold issue there that they're not even aware of. And here's the thing, the reason why it's really, really important is because you can't always see mold. I know there's this presumption that you can always see it and smell it, but that's not always the case. And mold isn't always black or white or green. It could be red. It could be invisible. It could be to the point where you can't even see it. So it's really important we know and understand there's a lot of this conversation that needs to be extended and had, but I think this is a very important, first step in that conversation. How do we get exposed to mold toxicity? Well, the air, that's one place, because again, like I was saying before, as mold grows, it creates these spores, which are essentially like dust particles. And these dust particles can have mycotoxins in them. And when we breathe and inhale them, we breathe and inhale those mycotoxins. Okay, so we can get it from breathing in the air. Okay, but we also can get it from touch, by touching things that we're not aware of that have mold on it. We also can get it by eating it as well, too. A large percentage of grains that we purchase, stock foods like corn and things of that nature, a lot of them are saturated with mold because they sit in dark, damp areas in warehouses for months and sometimes years before they're delivered to the shelf. And in that time, a lot of those foods gain a lot of mold on them, and then we consume them. Again, a lot of the times we're under the impression we can see and smell mold, but you can't always do that. So we even consume mold that we're unaware of as well too. Now let's talk about some of the common molds that we typically see that are indoor, okay? Because most of the ones that you come into contact outdoor, most of the time those are the ones you need to be concerned about. Again, the biggest concerns are the one that you're going to come into contact that are indoor, that are going to be in your home, at your workplace, for the schools or the daycares for kids. Those are the big problems because most of us are spending extended amount of time indoors, and these are areas that are basically circulating the air, recycling the air throughout the day. And imagine you're at work for 8 hours, your kids are at daycare for 8 hours, breathing in that recycled air, okay? So it's really important to understand that this is more so an indoor issue versus an outdoor issue. And so what are some of those common molds? Number one, cladosporium, okay? Cladosporium is a type of mold. Another one is penicillium. Now you probably have heard of penicillin, the drug or antibiotic that they use, but there's also that penicillin comes from a type of mold, okay? And it's important to know that a lot of things that they use in modern medicine can also be dangerous as well too. So penicillium is a type of mold, okay? Another one is alternaria, okay? Another type of mold. Another one is aspergillus, which is a very difficult type of mold to get rid of. And another one that a lot of people are familiar with is Stachybotrys, which is commonly referred to as black mold. And this is the mold that most people are most afraid of. But to be truthful, not all black mold is actually toxic, okay? So let me make that clear, but it's important to know that it's very hard to distinguish which ones aren't and which ones are. And so it's important to know that any type of mold or fungus growing in a home is always going to be a problem because you can't identify it, okay? Hugely important. I think the other thing that's really important to mention, again, like I just mentioned, not all black molds are toxic. There are over 10,000 species of different types of mold that spread and reproduce and, create spores, what ultimately could create some mycotoxins. But the vast majority of them are actually not toxic and are actually not creating mycotoxins, okay? But it's really important to know and understand that the conditions in which molds flourish are the same conditions that create an unhealthy environment. Damp, moisture, warm areas, humid areas. These are going to be very dangerous, especially when you're breathing in this mold every day. Like I said before, when if it's a situation where you get some acute exposure where you just maybe walk into a building that has mold and you walk out, maybe no problem. But according to a lot of the studies that they've done in Finland on workplaces that had mold, a significant amount of the population who were working in the buildings not only got mold toxicity, but a significant amount of that population also ended up with cancer down the line as well too. So this is a very important conversation for us to be having. And today we're going to talk about the symptoms, okay? The symptoms, so that you can start looking in the mirror and start to make sense of, if you go into the doctor and you have a lot of these symptoms, not just one of them, but you have a lot of these symptoms, this could be an opportunity at your next visit to say, well, let's look in to see if I possibly have some mold toxicity, okay? Hugely important. And the reason why that's so important is because a lot of times, again, our doctors won't be familiar with it. And so when you go in to see your doctor, the unfortunate thing is that you can't help somebody with something you're not looking for. and you can't help them if they don't know to look for it. And so I think that's hugely important. If there's no identifiers there and it's something that is not being looked at or looked for, then it's going to be a problem that never can be solved. Okay, so I'm going to give you, let's say 12 to 15 different symptoms that you could be experiencing as a result of having mold toxicity. And if you feel like you have a combination of these, not one single one, but if you feel like you have a combination of these, then I would be a little bit concerned. And then at the next doctor's visit, you definitely want to sort of look into this to see if it's not your issue, and even start to inspect the home to see if there are any areas of opportunity for mold to grow in the home, or possibly if it's not happening in today's home, it could have happened in a past home that you lived in as well, or workplace or school. Okay, so number one of the symptoms you will get as a result of mold toxicity is a metallic taste in the mouth. Okay, now again, I want to make this very important note. Not one thing can confirm any diagnosis. Okay, so a metallic taste in the mouth could literally come from a type of medication that you're taking. Okay, so it's important to know and understand that it can come from somewhere else, but what's also important is, again, if you have mold toxicity, this could be possibly one of the symptoms. Metallic taste in the mouth. Number two, chronic pain and inflammation. Chronic pain and inflammation. And quite often people with mold toxicity will see it around the abdomen area and also in the muscles, similar to like fibromyalgia. Okay, so chronic pain and inflammation is also a symptom. Number two. Number three, poor memory, issues with brain fog and anxiety as well too. Could also be an indication. Okay, so again, if you start to see a lot of these combinations, or you start to put your finger up in the air pretty consistently as I go through this list, then it should be an area of concern for you. Okay, number four, tinnitus or ringing in the ears. Okay, and some people say, again, ringing in the ears or tinnitus. Okay, go back, watch a previous video where I talk about this condition, ringing in the ears, and give a natural solution for that. You can check that out in my previous videos. But again, this could be one of the signs and symptoms, especially if you have a combination of all the ones that I'm mentioning here, more than 2 or 3, then I would start to kind of look in my home and then check workplaces, things of that nature. Okay. Number 5, vertigo or dizziness. Okay. If you start to get vertigo or dizziness for no apparent reason, and it's out of nowhere, lifestyle hasn't changed, no new medications, and you getting vertigo, it could be possibly due to mold toxicity. Okay. Number 6, digestive issues. Digestive issues. You'll start to notice that you'll have a lot of intolerances for foods that you always were fine with eating in the past. Okay. You'll also see a persistent bloating as well too. So again, if you start to see these symptoms stack up, okay, well, I do got a little ringing in the ears, and I do notice that I'm bloated all the time. Again, we can just start to add them up. Take a list for yourself. All right. Number 7, excessive thirst or dehydration. Okay. Now, again, excessive thirst or dehydration could also be due to diabetes. But also what we notice with we notice this with mold toxicity as well too. And in combination with this, also bedwetting in children. So if you start to see a combination of this where, your child comes to you and say, "Mom, it tastes like metal in my mouth," and then they start wetting the bed, and maybe they're like 7 or 8 years old, and they never had a problem with this issue before. It could be due to, a mold toxicity issue, because children are much more exposed to these type of toxicities because they still have a developing immune system. Okay, so again, excessive thirst, dehydration, or bedwetting in children, another sign and symptom of mold toxicity. Okay, another sign and symptom, number 8, is symptoms of hormonal imbalance. Okay, this could be hair loss. This could be rashes as well too. And a lot of times what happens is the mycotoxins will actually act as an endocrine disruptor in the body. And an endocrine disruptor could be like a fake estrogen, okay? Mirroring or acting as if or mimicking an estrogen in the body, causing an increase in estrogen, leading to estrogen dominance in the body and create these hormonal imbalances. But your hormonal imbalance could be caused by mold toxicity and even, again, previous mold toxicity from 2 or 3 homes ago. And you don't have the necessary, detoxification pathways and genes to eliminate these type of toxicity. This is why I always say herbs were made for the healing of the earth and healing of nations, and the nation is the body, okay? Another sign and symptom could be chronic fatigue. You're tired all the time, okay? If you feel like all the time you're tired, you wake up tired. In the middle of the day, you're tired. Throughout the evening, you're tired. You get into bed and then you wake up and you go over this over and over again. This also could be a sign or symptom that you're going through mold toxicity as well. Numbness and tingling, number 10, especially in the extremities. So in the hands and arms and especially in the lower legs. If you start to feel numbness and tingling in those areas in combination with a lot of the other symptoms that I mentioned before, it could be due to mold toxicity, okay? So again, that's number 10, tingling, numbness in the extremities. Number 11, mood changes, okay? Mood changes, you notice that all of a sudden, you used to be this happy-go-lucky person or just this neutral person. And now all of a sudden, you're having mood swings and you're moody all the time, okay? It could be due to mold toxicity as well too. Number 12, respiratory issues. And this is one of the biggest ones, especially with children, okay? Especially in Black and brown communities. Because unfortunately in Black and brown communities, what we notice is that a lot of the homes are older, that's one. And a lot of the homes aren't as taken care of as they need to be. Quite often what we see, what happens in underserved communities is that when there's an issue like a plumbing issue, it's usually a Band-Aid is slapped on it instead of actually fixing the issue. And so this leads to an even more complicated issue down the line, which ultimately could be mold toxicity or mold growth in the home. Okay. And what we notice with people who are being constantly exposed to mold that you quite often cannot see because maybe it's in the insulation, maybe it's in the attic, maybe it's coming up from the basement and you don't even know it. And what we also notice is that in underserved neighborhoods, quite often it's in the worst areas of town. And these are often in areas where it floods the most as well too. And so as a result of that, what we notice is that you're definitely going to have more mold issues in those areas, which is going to exacerbate respiratory conditions like asthma. And so what you'll notice in the Black and brown communities and the underserved communities, asthma goes up exponentially, okay? We also notice that issues with allergies go up exponentially when you're exposed to mold as well. And then wheezing and coughing as well too. So your wheezing, coughing, allergy symptoms, asthma, all could be attributed to mold toxicity created by mycotoxins. Okay, so number 12. Number 13 is vitamin and mineral depletion, having a lot of deficiencies, okay? If you have done everything you needed to do, you changed your diet, you started working out, you started getting more sun exposure, okay? You start taking supplements and nothing still changes. What you'll probably be able to look and see is that it could be possible mold. It could be a yeast overgrowth in the body as well too, which is another type of fungus. Okay, and those type of things will deplete you of your minerals and nutrition from your body because they're competing with you for them. Okay, so this is why we see people who often have mold toxicity have issues around, deficiencies as well too, especially when you correct the behavior, the lifestyle, and it still doesn't improve, okay? And I think that's important because supplements are a supplement, okay? They supplement to help, All right. They're not supposed to be the thing that solves the problem. They're only a supplement to get you to the healing. Okay. So if you got to take a supplement the rest of your life and you can't actually correct the deficiency, it's telling you that something is wrong. Again, it could be mold toxicity. All right. Number 14, increase in autoimmune conditions. Okay. This is really important because what happens is that the immune system is being constantly exposed to these mycotoxins. And as the immune system is being constantly exposed to these mycotoxins, it's causing the immune system to go haywire, to be hyperactive. And when the immune system becomes hyperactive, it starts to hyperreact not only to foreign invaders, but it also could start to hyperreact to the body itself, okay? Which is what a autoimmune condition is when the immune system attacks you, it attacks itself, okay? And so these mycotoxins can trigger that. And they have seen in some studies, the study I mentioned before in Finland, where they were looking at damaged buildings. And I think 11 of the persons working in the building developed autoimmune conditions, okay, within a few months. And I think they also saw that there was almost a 4 times higher exposure to mold in some of the buildings too. And we'll talk about that in another video about where all of this mold is coming from. But I thought that was a very important, study to kind of look at, to see what happens when somebody's in a condition and how many people, because at the end of the day, like, mold is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. I mean, fungus is in the soil, and even without fungus, the soil would die. We wouldn't be able to grow anything on earth. So I'm not here to tell you that all fungus is bad fungus, because it's a necessity for life on earth. But it's important to know that there are those that are good for you, and there are those that aren't. And quite often, the reason why we're having so many issues is because, again, in buildings. And so that study really sort of showed us the difference in what happens when people are being constantly exposed, not even in the home, but being exposed at work, okay, as well too. So it's not just at home. It's not just in the environments you can control. It's also environments like work, school, etc. as well too. And then the last one I'll mention is that you'll notice that you'll possibly could have thermal dysregulation. What that means is your body won't be able to regulate temperature. So when it's time to be warm, you'll be hot. When it's a little bit cool outside, you'll notice that you're super chilly. Your body will have problems with regulating its internal thermostat. And so that's also a symptom as well too. So again, no one symptom can confirm anything, okay? And I'm not your doctor, so I'm not here to give you medical advice. This is to help you to be able to understand the language of the body and how the body speaks to us when something is going on inside of it and is trying to communicate. And often these outward symptoms, the ones that I just mentioned, are essentially a communication outwardly to you about what's going on inside of the body. And so, again, I hope this video has been helpful. Comment below if you had a mold issue before and experienced any of these symptoms. Want to get this message out to the people, because again, this isn't a conversation that people will often experience when they go into the doctor and the doctor will ask about mold. It's quite often, if not the last thing, it's not a thing that they even ask about, because again, we're not taught this in school. Thanks for watching this video, but be sure to check the next video out that's right here. But everything I talk about is how do we take a holistic and natural approach to healing other than a man-made approach? And also, how do we prevent dis-ease in the body as well too? Because, they say